They looked at his hoodie and saw a threat. They looked at his skin and saw a criminal. When the gate agent at JFK sneered and tore up his first-class boarding pass, she thought she was taking out the trash. She had no idea she was declaring war on the man who could buy her entire airline before lunch. They refused to let him board, thinking they'd ruined his day. Instead, they handed him the perfect opportunity to ruin their careers. By the time their commercial flight touched down, he was already there, waiting on the tarmac, with a smile that was about to cost them everything. This is the story of how arrogance met its match at 40,000 feet. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with that specific headache-inducing frequency that only tired travelers seem to hear. For Silas Mercer, it was just white noise. He adjusted the strap of his worn leather duffel bag, a vintage piece that cost more than most mid-sized sedans, though it looked like something found in a thrift store bin, and checked his watch. He was cutting it close. Silas wasn't supposed to be flying commercial today. Usually he'd be departing from the Teterboro tarmac on his own Gulfstream G650ER. But the G650 was grounded for a mandatory avionics update, and the deal in London couldn't wait. The merger between his company, Mercer Logistics, and the European shipping giant Helios was the kind of contract that shifted global economies. He had to be at Heathrow by 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. He pulled his black hoodie up, slightly shielding his eyes from the glare. He liked traveling low profile. No entourage, no suits, no flashing the black Amex unless necessary. Today, that preference was about to become a liability. Priority boarding for Flight 882 to London Heathrow, first class and Diamond Medallion members only. The intercom crackled. Silas moved toward the carpeted lane. He was tired, his eyes red-rimmed from 3 days of coding sprints and board meetings. He held his phone out the QR code for his seat 1A, the prime spot glowing on the screen. The gate agent, a woman whose name tag read Bella, looked up from her computer. Her eyes heavily lined with blue makeup swept over Silas. She took in the sneakers, the hoodie, the tired slump of his shoulders. She didn't see the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. She saw a problem. "Excuse me, sir," Bella said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "This lane is for priority passengers only. Economy boarding will begin in 20 minutes. Please step back." Silas didn't blink. He was used to this. "I know. I'm in first class." He extended his arm to scan his phone. Bella didn't even look at the screen. She physically blocked the scanner with her hand. "Sir, I need you to step aside," she said louder this time. Heads in the nearby economy line began to turn. "We have paying customers trying to board." "I am a paying customer," Silas said, his voice calm, a deep baritone that usually commanded boardrooms into silence. "Seat 1A. Name is Silas Mercer. If you'll just let me scan—" "I don't care what your phone says," Bella snapped, dropping the customer service facade. "We've had a lot of fraudulent digital passes lately, and quite frankly, you don't look like our typical first-class demographic." Behind Silas, a man in a bespoke grey suit cleared his throat. He was tapping a gold watch, looking annoyed. "Is there a problem here? Some of us have places to be." Bella's face transformed instantly. She beamed at the man in the suit. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. Just dealing with some congestion. Please come right through." She unhooked the velvet rope to let the suited man pass. Silas stood his ground. "You're letting him board before checking my ticket?" Silas asked. The air around him seemed to cool. "Mr. Sterling is a frequent flyer," Bella scoffed, turning back to Silas with a sneer. "And he belongs here. Now step out of the line before I call security. I won't ask twice." "Check the manifest, Bella," Silas said, reading her tag. "Silas Mercer. It will take you 5 seconds." "I don't have time for your games," she yelled, causing the chatter at the gate to die down instantly. "You are disrupting the boarding process. You are aggressive and I feel threatened. Step back." The word threatened hung in the air like a weapon. Silas knew that word. It was the word that turned a misunderstanding into a headline, or worse, a tragedy. He saw the security guard near the food court perk up and start walking over. Silas took a breath. He looked at Bella, really looked at her. He memorized her face. Then he looked at Mr. Sterling, who was chuckling as he walked down the jet bridge. "Okay," Silas said softly. "I'll step back." Silas stepped out of the priority lane, but he didn't leave the counter. He walked to the main desk where a duty manager was furiously typing. This was his last attempt at civility. If they wanted to play hardball, he needed to know exactly who was pitching. "Excuse me," Silas said to the manager. The man was large, red-faced, with a badge that read Greg. Greg looked up, annoyed. "If this is about an upgrade, we're full." "It's not about an upgrade. Your agent Bella just refused me boarding. I have a confirmed first-class ticket, seat 1A. I need you to resolve this now." Greg said a heavy, dramatic exhale. He looked over at Bella, who was now scanning tickets for other passengers. She caught Greg's eye and mouthed something that looked suspiciously like troublemaker. Greg turned back to Silas, crossing his arms. "Bella is our senior agent. If she denied you boarding, she had a valid reason. Usually, it's behavior. We have a zero-tolerance policy for aggression." Silas let out a dry laugh. "Aggression I asked to scan my ticket. She let a man behind me pass without checking because he was wearing a suit, and she told me I didn't look like I belonged. That's discrimination, Greg. Pure and simple." "Watch your tone," Greg warned, his voice rising. "Accusing my staff of racism is a serious offense. We have the right to refuse service to anyone who compromises the safety or comfort of our passengers. Clearly you're agitated. I can smell the alcohol from here." Silas froze. He hadn't touched a drop of alcohol in 10 years. He drank sparkling water and espresso. That was it. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. This was a fabrication, a setup to justify their bias. "I am sober," Silas said, his voice turning icy. "I am the CEO of Mercer Logistics. I have a meeting in London that determines the employment of 3,000 people. If I am not on this plane, the fallout will be significant." Greg laughed. It was a loud barking sound that drew the attention of the entire waiting area. "Mercer Logistics, sure, buddy. And I'm the King of England. Look, pal, I don't care who you pretend to be. You're not getting on this flight. In fact, you're not flying with us at all." Greg typed furiously on his keyboard. A moment later, the printer whirred. He ripped a slip of paper out and slammed it on the counter. "Your ticket is refunded. You're banned from this airline for 24 hours, pending a security review. Now get out of my terminal before I have you escorted out in handcuffs." The humiliation was total. People were recording on their phones. A mother pulled her child closer, whispering about the dangerous man. Bella was smirking from the podium, clearly enjoying the show. The man in the suit, Mr. Sterling, had paused at the entrance of the jet bridge to watch the commotion, shaking his head in mock pity. Silas looked at the refunded receipt. He looked at Greg, whose face was flushed with the power trip. He looked at the passengers, the silent witnesses who wouldn't speak up. A calm clarity washed over him. He realized that arguing with a fool only proves there are two. He didn't need this seat. He didn't need this airline. He had tried to be humble, tried to be efficient. But the world, it seemed, required a demonstration. "You've made a mistake, Greg," Silas said. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. He simply adjusted his duffel bag. "A very expensive mistake." "Get out!" Greg shouted, pointing towards the exit. Silas turned and walked away. He could feel the eyes on his back, the mixture of fear and judgment. He walked past the security guard, who had his hand on his taser ready for a fight that never came. As soon as he was out of earshot of the gate, Silas pulled out his phone. He didn't call customer service. He didn't call a lawyer. He called a number saved in his contacts, simply as Operations Priority 1. "Mr. Mercer," the voice on the other end answered instantly. It was Sarah, his personal chief of staff. "I thought you were wheels up." "Change of plans," Silas said, walking briskly toward the exit, ignoring the bustling crowds. "Commercial didn't work out. I need a bird. Now." "The G650 is still in pieces in Taterboro, Silas," Sarah reminded him. "I can't get it in the air." "I don't need mine," Silas said, pushing through the revolving doors into the crisp New York air. "Charter 1. I want the fastest thing available at Republic Airport. A Bombardier Global 7500 or a G700. I need to be in London before Flight 882 lands." That's going to be tight, Silas. Flight 882 is a Boeing 707. It's fast. "I don't care what it costs, Sarah. Get me a Mach 0, 925 cruise speed. I want to be waiting at the gate when they get off. I want to greet Greg's passengers personally." There was a pause on the line, the sound of furious typing. "I found a Global 7500 sitting at Farmingdale. It's fueled and ready. It belongs to a hedge fund manager who just cancelled his trip to Dubai. I can secure it for 20,000 one way." "Book it," Silas said, hailing a black SUV that was already idling at the curb, his backup driver always on standby. "And Sarah—" "Yes, sir. Find out who owns the airline operating Flight 882, not the parent company, the holding group. I want to know who signs Greg and Bella's paychecks." "On it." Silas climbed into the back of the SUV. The driver, a burly man named Cole, looked in the rearview mirror. "Taterboro boss, no." Silas set his eyes hard as he watched the terminal fade into the distance. "Republic Airport, and step on it. We have a race to win." Back at gate B32, Greg and Bella were high-fiving. The jet bridge door closed. Flight 882 began its pushback. They thought the problem was gone. They thought they had won. They didn't know that up in the sky, speed is a matter of money. And Silas Mercer was about to spend a fortune just to prove a point. The back of the Cadillac Escalade was silent, save for the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the tires on the wet pavement. It had started to rain, a cold, miserable New York drizzle that smeared the city lights into blurry streaks of neon. Silas stared out the window, watching the world blur by. He wasn't looking at the scenery. He was replaying the scene at the gate. The way Bella's lip curled, the way Greg's face flushed with the petty intoxication of minor authority. It wasn't the rejection that stung. Silas had been rejected by banks, by investors, and by society more times than he could count during his climb from the streets of Detroit to the cover of Forbes. No, what burned was the injustice of the assumption. They assumed he was powerless. They assumed he was debris to be swept aside to make room for the important people. His phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "I have the dossier on the man in the grey suit." Sarah's voice came through the car's encrypted speakers. "You're going to love this." Silas leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me." "His name is Marcus Sterling. He's not just a frequent flyer, Silas. He's the vice president of guest experience for Stratosphere Air, the airline you just tried to fly." Silas let out a low, dark chuckle. It rumbled in his chest. The VP of guest experience watched a paying first-class customer get profiled and ejected, and he laughed. He cut the line that his own policies established. "He's on his way to London for a keynote speech." Sarah continued, the sound of her typing frantic in the background. "The conference is called The Future of Ethical Travel. He's speaking on inclusivity." "Irony is dead," Silas murmured. "And the airline Stratosphere Air." Their publicly traded ticker symbols stare. But here's the kicker, Silas. I ran a cross-reference on our logistics database. Mercer Logistics currently ships 40% of our transatlantic light cargo in the belly of Stratosphere's passenger flights. We are literally keeping their international division profitable. Silas sat back, a shark-like calm settling over him. "So I'm not just a passenger. I'm their biggest customer. Essentially, if we pull our freight contracts, their quarterly earnings will implode." "Draft the termination notice, Sarah," Silas said softly. "But don't send it yet. I want to look Marcus in the eye when the stock price drops." The SUV swerved off the highway and passed through the heavy security gates of Republic Airport, KFRG, in Farmingdale. This was a different world from JFK. There were no lines, no screaming children, no shoes to take off, just sleek hangars and the smell of jet fuel, which to Silas smelled like freedom. The car pulled up directly onto the tarmac, stopping inches from the red carpet laid out beneath the stairs of a sleek white jet. It wasn't just any plane. It was a Bombardier Global 7500, the apex predator of private aviation. Its wingspan was enormous, flexing slightly in the wind, and its engines were already spooling, emitting a high-pitched whine that vibrated in Silas's teeth. The pilot was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Captain Reynolds, a man with graying temples and the posture of a former fighter pilot. He didn't ask for a ticket. He didn't ask for ID. He simply opened an umbrella to shield Silas from the rain. "Mr. Mercer," Reynolds said, shouting over the engine noise. "We're fueled for maximum cruise. Flight plan is filed. We have a slot." "How fast can we get there, Reynolds?" Silas asked, gripping the handrail. "We'll be flying at Mach 0.925. That's just shy of the sound barrier, sir. We're going to burn a lot of fuel." "Burn it all," Silas said, bounding up the stairs. Inside the cabin was a sanctuary of cream leather and walnut wood. The air smelled of expensive sanitizer and fresh orchids. There was no Greg, no Bella, just silence and power. Silas threw his duffel bag onto a divan and fell into the main club seat. A flight attendant named Chloe appeared instantly with a crystal tumbler. "Sparkling water with a twist of lime, Mr. Mercer. Just how you like it." "Thank you, Chloe," Silas said, taking the glass. His hands were steady. "Captain says we're wheels up in 2 minutes. We've been cleared for an unrestricted climb to 45,000 feet. We'll be soaring over the weather." Silas looked out the porthole window. Somewhere to the west, Flight 882 was taxiing in a conga line of traffic at JFK, stuck in the mud, weighed down by hundreds of passengers and the arrogance of its crew. "Let's hunt," Silas whispered. The takeoff of a Global 7500 is not like a commercial airliner. There is no rattle, no struggle against gravity. It is a surge of pure, unadulterated physics. Silas was pressed deep into his leather seat as the jet tore down the runway and rocketed into the sky at a 40-degree angle. Within minutes they punched through the cloud layer, leaving the gloomy New York rain far below. The sun was shining up here. It was always sunny if you could fly high enough. Silas opened his laptop. The Wi-Fi on the jet was faster than most office connections. He pulled up Flight Radar 24 on one screen and the Mercer Logistics Terminal on the other. He found Flight 882. The little yellow plane icon was just leaving the coastline of Long Island. It was a Boeing 777 300ER. A magnificent machine, true, but it was limited by commercial regulations, fuel economy mandates, and air traffic congestion. It was cruising at 33,000 feet, doing a respectable 560 knots. Silas looked at his own telemetry. The Global 7500 was leveling off at 51,000 feet, far above the commercial lanes. The speed indicator climbed. Mach 0.85, Mach 0.90, Mach 0.925. They were moving at nearly 700 miles per hour across the ground. He did the math. Flight 882 had a 45-minute head start. But the Global 7500 was flying a more direct route, thanks to its altitude capabilities, and it was significantly faster. The estimated arrival times were agonizingly close. Flight 882, ETA 07:55 a.m. Global 7500, ETA 07:45 a.m. 10 minutes. He had a 10-minute window to clear customs, get to the arrival gate, and set the stage. It was razor thin. If they hit a headwind, if ATC air traffic control put them in a holding pattern over Heathrow, he would lose. Silas picked up the cabin phone. Reynolds, go ahead, Mr. Mercer. I'm looking at the numbers. It's too close. If we get stacked at Heathrow, I miss them. I see it, sir. Reynolds's voice was calm. Commercial traffic is heavy into London tomorrow morning. The morning rush. Everyone lands between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. I need an edge, Reynolds. There was a pause. I can request a priority handling status if you authorize the surcharge. We can categorize this flight as a medical transport if you're feeling unwell. Or we can use the diplomatic protocol if you have the connections. No, Silas said firmly. We do this legally. I don't want them to have any ammunition against me. What about Farnborough Airport? It's strictly private, no commercial traffic to wait behind. Farnborough is an option, sir. We can land there faster, but it's an hour drive to Heathrow from Farnborough. You'd never make it to their gate in time. Silas stared at the map. He needed to land at Heathrow to meet them at the gate. But Heathrow prioritized the big commercial birds. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. The billions of dollars at his disposal, and he was still at the mercy of air traffic control. Then an idea struck him. A memory from a logistics negotiation years ago. Reynolds, what if we don't land at the main terminal? What if we land at the Royal Suite, the VIP terminal on the south side of Heathrow? The Windsor Suite, sir. That's for heads of state and royalty. It costs £3,000 just to open the door, and you need pre-clearance. Get the clearance, Silas commanded. Call the ground team. Tell them Mercer Logistics is paying. Triple the fee if they approve it now. If we land at the Windsor Suite, we bypass the main customs queue entirely. A car picks us up at the aircraft steps. Stand by, Reynolds said. Silas watched the screen. The little yellow icons were inching across the blue expanse of the Atlantic. It was a silent, slow-motion race in the dark. Inside the cabin, the lights were dimmed to a soft amber. Silas didn't sleep. He spent the next 4 hours building his weapon. He wasn't building a gun. He was building a dossier. He pulled up the internal emails Sarah had hacked or acquired from the Mercer logistics server, showing the volume of freight they shipped with Stratosphere Air. He drafted a press release. Mercer Logistics suspends partnership with Stratosphere Air, citing values misalignment and discriminatory practices. He looked at the document. It was a nuclear bomb. Stratosphere operated on razor-thin margins. Losing the Mercer contract would panic shareholders. The stock would dip. And when the video of the incident, which he knew someone had recorded, hit the internet, the stock would crash. But Silas didn't want to destroy the airline. That would hurt the mechanics, the baggage handlers, the innocent pilots. He wanted the rot. He wanted Greg. He wanted Bella. And he wanted Marcus Sterling. "Mr. Mercer." Reynolds came back over the intercom, his voice sounding tighter. "Yes, we have a problem. There's a storm front over Ireland, a massive low-pressure system. Flight 882 is plowing right through it. They're going to get battered. And us, we're at 51,000 feet. We're skimming the top of it, but the headwinds are picking up. It's going to cut our speed. We're losing the lead, sir." Silas watched the numbers. Global 7500 ETA 0752 AM. Flight 882 ETA 0755 AM. 3 minutes. The margin had evaporated. "Push the engines to the red line, Reynolds," Silas said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If we burn out a turbine, I'll buy you a new one. But do not let that Boeing beat us." Outside, the stars were steady and cold. But below them, in the thick atmosphere, where the 707 struggled, turbulence was raging. Silas imagined Marcus Sterling spilling his champagne, gripping the armrests, wondering if the plane would hold together. "Hold on tight, Marcus," Silas thought. "The ride hasn't even started yet." The descent into London was a battle against the atmosphere. The storm front that Reynolds had warned about was draped over the United Kingdom like a bruised purple bruise. Even at 45,000 feet, the Global 7500 shuddered as it began its initial descent, the carbon fiber wings flexing to absorb the unseen blows of the wind. Silas hadn't moved from the window. Below him, the cloud layer was an impenetrable sheet of grey wool. Somewhere inside that grey mass, Flight 882 was being tossed around. He imagined the scene in the first-class cabin. Champagne glasses tilting dangerously, the seatbelt sign chiming incessantly, the nervous laughter of passengers who suddenly realized that money cannot buy smooth air. "Top of descent, Mr. Mercer." Reynolds' voice crackled over the intercom, clipped and professional. "Heathrow approach has given us a vector. We're coming in hot. I've requested a high-speed approach to the outer marker." "Do it," Silas murmured. The plane dipped its nose. The engine whine shifted from a steady hum to a lower, throaty idle. The sensation of falling was controlled but palpable. They punched through the clouds at 20,000 feet, and the world suddenly went dark and wet. Rain lashed against the portholes, streaking horizontally at 300 miles per hour. Silas checked his watch. 07:38 AM. He checked the flight tracker. Flight 882 was on final approach 5 miles ahead of them. They were losing. "They're ahead of us," Silas said into the phone, his voice devoid of emotion. "Visual contact," Reynolds replied. "I see their strobes. They're slow, sir. They're fighting a 20-knot crosswind. They're crabbing sideways." Silas watched the screen. The speed of the Boeing 707 had dropped to 140 knots for landing. The Global 7500 lighter and more agile kept its speed up until the last possible second. "Tower is slotting us in immediately behind them," Reynolds said. "We'll be on the ground 3 minutes after they touch down. It's going to be tight." The landing gear deployed with a heavy mechanical thunk that reverberated through the floorboards. The ground rushed up the familiar drear sprawl of London suburbs, wet slate roofs and headlights on the M25 motorway. The Global 7500 flared over the runway. The tyres kissed the wet asphalt of Heathrow with barely a shudder, a testament to Reynolds's skill. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the beast down. "Welcome to London, Mr. Mercer," the flight attendant said, unbuckling her jump seat strap. "Temperature is a chilly 8 degrees Celsius. Don't open the door yet," Silas commanded, standing up and smoothing his hoodie. He grabbed his duffel bag. "Reynolds, taxi speed." "Way ahead of you, sir." While Flight 882 had to lumber its way through the labyrinth of taxiways to Terminal 3, waiting for other planes to push back. Waiting for gate guidance, the Global 7500 peeled off the main runway and headed straight for the Windsor Suite. The Windsor Suite is the world's most exclusive airport terminal. Hidden away on the south side of Heathrow, behind high fences and armed guards, it is the gateway for royals, prime ministers, and billionaires who value time more than gold. There are no queues here, no fluorescent lights. The jet came to a halt. Before the engines had even fully spooled down, a black BMW 7 Series with tinted windows was racing across the tarmac, followed by a luxury van for luggage. The aircraft door opened, and the damp London air rushed in. Silas didn't wait for the umbrella. He bounded down the stairs, his sneakers splashing in a puddle. A woman in an immaculate navy suit was waiting by the car door. "Mr. Mercer." "Welcome to the Windsor Suite. I have your passport details pre-cleared. If you'll just step into the lounge for a—" "No lounge," Silas said, sliding into the back of the BMW. "No tea, no biscuits. I need to be at Terminal 3 Arrivals Gate 22, now." The woman blinked, surprised by the urgency. Usually guests spent an hour sipping vintage cognac. "So traffic on the perimeter road is—" "I don't care about traffic," Silas said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "Drive on the tarmac if you have to. Just get me there." The driver, a stoic man who had likely driven diplomats through war zones, nodded once. He floored the accelerator. The BMW surged forward, pressing Silas back into the soft leather. They tore out of the VIP compound, bypassing the main airport loop. Silas watched the raindrops race across the window glass. He checked the tracker one last time. Flight 882 arrived at gate. Status deplaning. He was late. "Faster," Silas whispered. The wheels of the Bombardier Global 7500 hissed against the wet pavement of the Heathrow tarmac, a sound like silk tearing. They had arrived. Silas Mercer didn't wait for the fasten seatbelt sign to dim. He was already standing, his body humming with a kinetic energy that had nothing to do with the caffeine and everything to do with the hunt. Outside the porthole, London was a watercolor painting of grey misery. Rain lashed against the glass in horizontal sheets, driven by the same storm that had battered Flight 882. But here on the ground, the violence of the wind was muffled, reduced to a distant, impotent howl. The jet taxied not to the chaotic sprawl of Terminal 3, but to the south side of the airfield, toward a low, nondescript building that housed the Windsor Suite. This was the sanctuary of heads of state visiting royalty and the ghosts of the ultra-wealthy who preferred to move through the world unseen. As the stairs lowered, the smell of jet fuel and damp earth flooded the cabin. It was a raw industrial scent, that Silas loved. It smelled like machinery. It smelled like business. A black BMW 7 Series, polished to a mirror. Shine, despite the weather, was idling at the bottom of the stairs. A woman in an impeccable navy suit stood by the open rear door, holding a massive black umbrella. She looked like she had been carved out of ice. "Mr. Mercer," she said, as Silas bounded down the stairs, ignoring the rain that instantly darkened the shoulders of his hoodie. "Welcome to the Windsor Suite. Your passport has been pre-cleared digitally. If you would like to step into the lounge, we have a selection of—" "No lounge." Silas cut her off, his voice low, but vibrating with urgency. He slid into the back seat of the car, the leather interior enveloping him in a cocoon of silence. "I need to get to Terminal 3 arrivals, the main public exit, Gate 22. The woman blinked a momentary crack in her professional veneer. Clients who used the Windsor Suite paid thousands of pounds, specifically to avoid the public terminals. They paid to avoid the noise, the smells, and the people. "Sir," she said, closing the door and sliding into the front passenger seat. "The perimeter road is gridlocked. The morning shift change combined with the weather." "I don't have time for gridlock," Silas said, leaning forward. His eyes met the driver's in the rearview mirror. The driver was a thick-necked man, with eyes like flint. "Drive airside. Use the service roads. Go under the wings if you have to. Just get me to Terminal 3 in 10 minutes. The driver looked at the woman. She gave a barely perceptible nod. "Hold on," the driver grunted. The BMW surged forward, not toward the exit gate, but deeper onto the tarmac. They tore past rows of slumbering giants, Airbus A380s and Boeing 707s, parked at remote stands. Silas watched the raindrops race across the window glass, distorting the lights of the airport into streaks of neon blood. He checked his phone. Flight A82 landed. 7:42 a.m. Status taxiing to gate. He had beaten the plane to the ground, but he hadn't beaten the passengers to the curb. The race was now measured in seconds. The car swerved sharply, bypassing a luggage tug train, and screeched to a halt at a restricted service entrance near Terminal 3. "This is as close as we can get you legally, sir," the hostess said, turning around. "You'll have to go through the staff corridor and come out near the baggage claim exit." "Perfect," Silas said. He grabbed his battered leather duffel bag, the bag that looked like it held gym clothes but actually contained a laptop worth more than the car he was sitting in, and opened the door. "Put the cost on the Mercer account. Tip the driver triple." He slammed the door and sprinted. Silas moved through the service corridors of Heathrow like a phantom. He flashed his digital security clearance, a top-tier logistics pass that granted him access to almost any transport hub in the Western world at a bewildered security guard who barely had time to look up from his coffee. He burst through a set of double doors and was instantly assaulted by the wall of sound that is Heathrow arrivals. It was a sensory overload. The air was thick, warm, and smelled of stale espresso floor wax and human exhaustion. Hundreds of people were pressed against the barriers. There were drivers holding iPads with names like Smith and Al-Fayed. There were families clutching bouquets of wilting flowers. There were toddlers screaming their cries, piercing the low, constant rumble of rolling suitcases. Silas slowed his pace. He didn't want to look like he was rushing. He wanted to look like he had been there for hours. He wanted to look like a fixture of the airport itself. He found a spot directly in the center of the exit path, right where the frosted glass doors of the customs hall slid open to vomit passengers out into the real world. He dropped his duffel bag at his feet. He put his hands in the pockets of his hoodie. He lowered his head slightly, letting the shadow of his hood obscure his eyes. He waited. He became a statue in a river of motion. People bumped into him and muttered apologies or curses, but he didn't move. He was focusing his breathing, lowering his heart rate. He needed to be ice cold. The doors slid open. The first wave of passengers from Flight 808-2 stumbled out. They looked wrecked. The storm over the Atlantic had clearly been brutal. Men in $5,000 suits looked disheveled, their ties loosened, their faces pale and pasty. A woman was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The sheer relief of being on solid ground was palpable in the air. Silas scanned every face. He wasn't looking for the victims. He was looking for the villain. Then he saw the uniform. The captain emerged, dragging his flight bag, looking like he had just wrestled a bear. Behind him came the cabin crew, their smiles plastered on, but their eyes dead. And then striding behind them with an air of unearned royalty came Marcus Sterling. Marcus looked infuriatingly fresh, while the other passengers looked like they had been through a washing machine. Marcus looked like he had just stepped out of a spa. He had likely slept through the turbulence in the lie-flat comfort of seat 2A, oblivious to the chaos outside, just as he was oblivious to the chaos he created. He was walking next to a young woman, his assistant, and he was gesturing expansively with a manicured hand. "And that is precisely why the keynote needs to pivot," Marcus was saying, his voice projecting over the din of the crowd. "We need to talk about the soul of travel, the connection, the inclusivity. I want the audience to feel that Stratosphere Air isn't just an airline. It's a family." Silas felt a cold, sharp laugh build in his chest, but he suppressed it. A family, he thought. A dysfunctional, abusive family. Silas took one step forward. Just one. But it was calculated to place him directly in Marcus's trajectory. Marcus, deep in his monologue about his own brilliance, didn't see him until he was 2 feet away. He stopped abruptly, his polished Oxfords squeaking on the linoleum. He looked up. He saw the hoodie. He saw the sneakers. He saw the tired, unshaven face. For a long, stretched second, there was no recognition in Marcus's eyes. There was only the automatic biological disgust of a predator looking at something he considered prey. His brain registered obstacle and low status simultaneously. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his tone clipped and dismissive. He moved to step around Silas to the left. Silas sidestepped to the left, blocking him again. Marcus sighed a dramatic theatrical exhale of patience being tested. He rolled his eyes and moved to the right. Silas mirrored him instantly, a wall of concrete in a cotton hoodie. "Okay, look," Marcus snapped, finally making eye contact, his face flushing with irritation. "I don't have any cash, I don't smoke, and I'm in a hurry. Go bother someone else." "How was the flight, Marcus?" The voice was a low rumble, deep and resonant. It wasn't the voice of a beggar. It was the voice of a judge reading a verdict. Marcus froze. The name. The voice. The familiarity of it, hooked into a memory he had tried to discard hours ago in New York. His brow furrowed. He squinted, leaning in slightly. Then the realization hit him. His eyes widened. A smirk, ugly and reflexive, tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Oh," Marcus chuckled, looking around to see if his assistant was watching this farce. "It's you, the agitated gentleman from JFK, the one Bella had to handle." He shook his head in mock disbelief. "My God, you are persistent. How on earth did you get here? Did you cling to the landing gear, or did you max out a credit card for a middle seat in economy on a budget carrier?" Silas didn't blink. The chaos of the airport seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a spotlight of tension. "I didn't fly economy, Marcus," Silas said softly. Right. Marcus laughed, checking his Rolex. "Look, I admire the hustle. Really, it takes a lot of effort to stalk a corporate executive across an ocean just to complain about a seat assignment. But I have a keynote speech to give in an hour. It's about ethical leadership. I don't have time for your little grievance." Marcus stepped forward, expecting Silas to yield. Men like Marcus were used to the world parting for them. They were used to doors opening. Silas didn't yield. He leaned in, invading Marcus's personal space, radiating a cold, terrifying calm. "You're not going to your keynote, Marcus." "Excuse me." Marcus bristled, his voice rising an octave. "Are you threatening me because security is 10 feet away? I can have you arrested for harassment. Again." "It's not a threat," Silas said. "It's a status update." Slowly, deliberately, Silas pulled his smartphone from his pocket. He tapped the screen once and turned it around so Marcus could see it. It wasn't a photo. It wasn't a video. It was a live financial chart from the London Stock Exchange. The ticker symbol Stare Stratosphere Air was at the top. The line, which should have been a jagged mountain range, was a cliff, a straight vertical red line plummeting into the abyss. What is that?" Marcus asked, his brain struggling to process the data. "That," Silas said, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the noise like a razor, "is the live reaction to a press release issued 20 minutes ago. The press release states that Mercer Logistics, your airline's single largest transatlantic freight partner, has terminated all contracts effective immediately, citing discriminatory practices and leadership incompetence." Marcus went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Mercer. Logistics," Marcus stammered. His knees wobbled. You're a driver for Mercer." "I am Mercer," Silas said. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Marcus stared at him. He looked at the frayed drawstrings of the hoodie. He looked at the scuffed sneakers. And then he looked at the eyes. The intelligence, the power, the sheer, unmitigated authority that had been there all along. "Mr. Mercer," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. I didn't know. Bella, she said I didn't look the part," Silas finished for him. "And you agreed. You laughed. You cut in line because you saw a suit, and I saw a hoodie. You measured a man by his fabric, Marcus. And that calculation just cost your company $200 million in market cap in the last hour." "Sir, please," Marcus pleaded, reaching out a hand, his arrogance replaced by a desperate, pathetic fear. "It was a misunderstanding. I can fix this. I can get you an upgrade for the return. I don't want your upgrade," Silas said, his voice hard as steel. "I flew here on my own jet, Marcus, a Global 7500. I was flying at 51,000 feet while you were bumping through the turbulence. I beat you here by 10 minutes. Silas took a step back, looking at Marcus with a mixture of pity and disgust. "And while I was up there," Silas added, delivering the final blow, "I bought the dip, Marcus. I bought every share your panicked investors sold. As of 5 minutes ago, I am the majority shareholder of Stratosphere Air." Marcus looked like he was going to vomit. His phone began to buzz in his pocket. Then his assistant's phone buzzed. Then the smartwatch on his wrist lit up. It was a symphony of disaster. "You should probably answer that," Silas said, nodding at the vibrating pocket. "It's the board of directors. You're late for the emergency meeting I just called." Silas didn't wait for an answer. He hoisted his duffel bag onto his shoulder, adjusted his hood, and turned his back on the man who had tried to humiliate him. He walked out into the grey London morning, leaving Marcus Sterling standing alone in the crowd, drowning in the noise, holding a phone he was too terrified to answer. The walk from the arrivals hall to the curbside pickup was the longest walk of Marcus Sterling's life. His phone was vibrating so intensely in his pocket, it felt like a second heartbeat, a frantic arrhythmic pulse of disaster. He finally pulled it out. 47 missed calls, 12 urgent emails from the board of directors, and 1 push notification from Bloomberg. Stratosphere Air Stare plummets 18% in pre-market trading after losing key logistics partner. Marcus slumped against a concrete pillar near the taxi stand. The grey London rain soaked into his bespoke Italian suit, turning the expensive fabric dark and heavy. He looked down at his screen. A video was trending on Twitter. It had been uploaded 2 hours ago by a teenager who had been standing in line at JFK. The caption read, "Gate agent mocks billionaire CEO for wearing a hoodie. Karma incoming." Flight 882, a Silas Mercer. Marcus pressed play. The video was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. He heard Bella's shrill voice, "You don't look like our typical first-class demographic." He heard Greg's barking laughter. And then he saw himself. The camera panned to him in his grey suit, chuckling, cutting the line, looking down his nose at Silas with a smirk that now looked like a death wish. The comments were a bloodbath. "That's Marcus Sterling, the VP of Guest Experience. The irony is suffocating. Cancel Stratosphere Air. Imagine judging Silas Mercer. I'm selling my stock. This company is rot from the head down." Marcus dropped his phone. The screen cracked against the pavement. He didn't pick it up. He knew that by the time he got to the office, his keycard wouldn't work. Three days later, the emergency board meeting of Stratosphere Air was held in a glass-walled conference room in Canary Wharf. The mood was funeral. The CEO, a stern woman named Eleanor Vance, sat at the head of the table. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Marcus sat at the far end, stripped of his tie, stripped of his confidence. He looked smaller. "The damage," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage, "is catastrophic. We haven't just lost the Mercer contract, we've lost the public. Cancellations are up 30% in 48 hours. Our brand is toxic." She tapped a tablet in front of her. "And we have a new majority shareholder who has demanded a restructuring of our executive team. He is joining us remotely." The massive screen on the wall flickered to life. Silas Mercer appeared. He wasn't in a boardroom. He was sitting in his office in New York, the skyline visible behind him. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a fresh black hoodie. The room went deadly silent. "Mr. Mercer," Eleanor said, her voice tight. "Thank you for joining us." Silas didn't smile. He leaned into the camera. "Let's keep this brief. I have a company to run, and unlike some people in this room, I don't judge competence by the thread count of a jacket." His eyes on the screen seemed to lock directly onto Marcus. "I have acquired 22% of Stratosphere's voting shares," Silas continued. "I did this to ensure that the culture of this airline is burned to the ground and rebuilt. You treat people like cattle because you think you have a monopoly on the sky. You don't. We are drafting a public apology, Mr. Mercer." Marcus spoke up, his voice cracking. I am prepared to issue a statement regarding unconscious bias training for all staff. Save the press release, Marcus. Silas cut him off. This isn't a training issue, it's a character issue. You saw a man you thought was weak and you tried to crush him. You did it because it made you feel big. That is not a bias. That is a defect. Silas looked down at a paper on his desk. Here are my terms for not liquidating my position and bankrupting this airline by noon today. First, the gate agent Bella and the duty manager Greg are to be terminated immediately for cause. They violated 3 separate federal discrimination statutes. Their behavior was recorded. It is indefensible. Eleanor nodded quickly. Done. They were let go this morning. Second, Silas continued, Marcus Sterling is to be removed as Vice President of Guest Experience. Marcus flinched. He closed his eyes. However, Silas added a dark twist entering his tone. I don't want him fired. Not yet. Marcus opened his eyes, confusion warring with hope. Firing him is too easy, Silas said. He needs to understand the product he was so proud of. I want Marcus reassigned. Stratosphere. Air. Has a chaotic baggage handling center in Newark, doesn't it? Doesn't it? The one with the highest rate of lost luggage and the angriest customers. Eleanor hesitated. Yes, sir. It's a difficult station. Perfect, Silas said. Marcus is your new junior shift supervisor at the Newark baggage claim. He will work the night shift. He will deal with the angry people. He will apologize to every single mother whose stroller was broken and every businessman whose suit was lost. He will do this for 6 months. If he quits, he forfeits his severance package and his stock options. If he stays, we can talk about his future. The room gasped. It was a sentence worse than termination. It was humiliation. It was forcing a king to scrub the floors of his own castle. Do you accept, Marcus? Silas asked. Marcus looked at the table. He thought about his mortgage. He thought about his reputation, which was currently in ashes. He had no leverage. He had no cards. I accept, Marcus whispered. Good, Silas said. One last thing. The Mercer Logistics contract remains cancelled. I'm moving our business to a carrier that understands that money is green, regardless of who is holding it. But, Eleanor started. Fix your house, Eleanor, Silas said. Then ask me for a meeting. And next time, check the manifest. The screen went black. 6 months later, on a humid Tuesday night at Newark Liberty International Airport, a man in a neon safety vest was sweating through his shirt. The baggage belt had jammed again. A line of 40 angry passengers was screaming at him. Where is my bag? It's been an hour. A man in a suit yelled, slamming his hand on the counter. I'm very sorry, sir, the man in the vest said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked tired. His hair was graying. We're doing our best. Please bear with us. You don't look like you know what you're doing, the passenger snapped. I want to speak to your manager. The man in the vest let out a long, weary sigh. He remembered the feeling of champagne glass stems. He remembered the quiet of the first-class lounge. He looked at the angry passenger, and for a fleeting second, he saw a ghost of his former self. I am the manager, Marcus Sterling said softly, and I promise you I'm listening.
Doesn't move.
Thousands of miles away, at 45,000 feet, Silas Mercer sat in seat 1A of a commercial flight, a different airline this time. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. He looked out the window at the clouds bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. The flight attendant walked by. She didn't sneer. She smiled genuinely. Can I get you anything, Mr. Mercer? Silas smiled back. Just water, please. I'm good. He closed his eyes, the hum of the engines lulling him into a peaceful rest. He wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. The ledger was balanced, the race was won, and the view from here was perfect. Silas Mercer didn't just teach an airline a lesson. He taught them the cost of prejudice. In a world obsessed with image, Bella Gregg and Marcus forgot that true power doesn't need to announce itself. They looked at a hoodie and saw a nobody failing to realize that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who has nothing to prove. They tried to save a seat for someone important, only to realize they had kicked off the only person who could save them. It cost them their jobs, their reputation, and millions of dollars. The next time you judge someone by their appearance, remember Silas Mercer. You never know who you're talking to or how fast they can fly. Wow. Talk about a high-altitude takedown. What do you think? Did Marcus deserve the night shift? Or was Silas too harsh? I want to hear your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and billionaire justice, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. I drop new stories every week about arrogance meeting its match. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're the first to board the next story. Thanks for watching and fly safe.